This is part 2 of the Mystery Tamiya Frog Monoshock suspension kit. Here's the little baggie it came in, marked as frog suspension in Sharpie. And that's all we know. We have that to go on, and we have the instructions to go on. Unspecified part 1231. This is the Monoshock. I wanted to show a few things, got some good feedback as far as the first video is concerned, and some ideas as to where the origin of this Monoshock came from. First, I just wanted to show how the suspension is set up without the Monoshock. This is the UG springs, the internal two springs from the UG system with independent dampers that we intend to use in some incarnation of the Frog. But first stop, we wanted to keep it even more retro and keep the Monoshock. But I couldn't resist the smooth springs from the UG kit, and they are in there right now. And this Frog isn't fully set up. The back end isn't finished, so it's hard to do a proper drop test. But you can see here that it's nice and springy, and there's no binding, and that's using these UG springs and using this setup that has this Mystery Monoshock brackets on the front. And I mentioned before, it's the CRP. These are the CRP arms that have built-in bushings on the inside. There's metal pieces, so they ride perfectly tight on the stock Tamiya hardware. This Mystery Monoshock, it came with something interesting. The hardware it came with were these screws in these little sheaths here, these little bushings. So had I not been using the CRPs, I could have used this. And this is kind of cool because this thing nicely fits perfectly inside the stock Tamiya arms here, and essentially does the same thing that the CRPs does from the other side. So the CRP has this built in. If it wasn't there, I would be using this. It's not compatible because it's exactly the same diameter as the bushing that's inside of the CRP arms. But I love these CRP arms. They seem to be a great perfect vintage hop-up for these cars. And I love that I get to use them because this Monoshock doesn't have reliance on a custom arm. And also there's other great, rushing to finish this because I know there's going to be other great solutions coming down the pike. For example, Ampro has come up with this brand new 3D printed front end. Ampro makes wonderful 3D printed stuff for so many cars, including the Frog. I'm using his centered steering servo here. These are Ampro parts, and we've got an Ampro skid plate in the back that you can't see. But he has built this amazing two-piece hop-up here for the front end that allows for a proper shock. Your more standard shock that has the damper and the spring built in. And maybe someday, but still, for fun, I wanted to do this rebuild as vintage as possible, so we're going to keep with the vintage hop-ups for now. But it's good to know that the CRP arms would be compatible with Ampro's setup, and you can still get these suckers on eBay. A little pricey, but I'd say they're absolutely worth it because there's so little play or slop, and along with a nice cushy spring, in this case the UG spring, makes for a really nice supple Frog front end. And I'm not going to be running the stock wheels, which have a lot more cushion, so we need all the cushion we can get. But I just wanted to show this setup without the Monoshock attached, just to show how it felt, how strong it was, and how these little arms weren't really creating much friction at all, and certainly no binding you can see here. Now the next thing to do is deal with the shock. The damper itself, and try to optimize this. Now we put in the Tamiya yellow shock oil that came stock with the Frog, and this is my first time. This is my second time setting up a damper. I did the Frog dampers, which are obviously some next gen stuff with diaphragms that move. This is the simple shock. And I think I've set it up wrong. One, it's still a little bit too stiff, but then also, you can see it right there, it wants to pull itself in, and I'm not sure why that is. I'm guessing it has to do something with the air or lack of air or suction inside of the thing. But both, if you push it all the way in, it sort of seems, depending upon the temperature, it seems like it wants to push itself out a little bit. But then also, even more so, is that it wants to retract itself. Maybe that has to do with when I screwed it on, there might have been, it might not have been fully extended, so it's creating some sort of a suction drag. But got to deal with that. But I think that's also a good sign that shows that this little damper has got a good seal on it, and it's got to be at least contributed to the nylon tape on the part there. So it isn't leaking, and it seems to be firm and wants to wants to move. So the seal seems to be good, but we don't want that. So got to figure that out. And then now we're gonna move to the softest oil we can find from Tamiya. Currently, we've got the 400, the yellow in. We're gonna jump down to the 200, the pink. Looks like a cosmopolitan colored silicone. And hopefully this is soft enough. And if it's not soft enough, we'll maybe try the technique that Jugular on the Tamiya Club Forums suggested, which is that his point was it's not a matter of using oil, it's a matter of just getting proper damper, and that sometimes a damper like this, you don't need to rely on the actual piston moving in oil. What you want to do is just use the resistance and oil resistance. So maybe drain out the oil down to just enough for lubrication for the little O-ring to provide all the damper. So we have options. Also, one other thing I wanted to show was how close, when this is in place, that it does indeed fit. It's very, very close, but I think it's kind of cool and low profile. If I needed it to be further away from the body, it could probably sit on this side of the braces here. So anyway, those are the marching orders. I'm going to try to reconfigure this sucker with a lighter oil or little to no oil. We're going to try to get rid of this memory, this retraction effect. And then we had one more little setback with this sucker that's keeping us from doing, drop tests, because we don't have the back set up. But I was putting this together on a brand new space frame, and I got some major crackage back there. So this is fatally broken. So waiting on a new chassis coming in the mail. And that's a bummer, because that means I'm gonna have to take this apart and put it all back together and hope that I can get it in his good shape and configuration as it was working on this one. So got to go back to square one before we get to move forward. But that's part of the fun, right? And I'll get really good at setting up these frog front ends, hopefully. Thank you guys for watching. Love the comments. Oh, one last thing. Tamiya Nerd on the forum, Tamiya Club. If you're not on the forum, Tamiya Club, I don't know why not. It's such a fun forum. Everybody's so friendly and helpful. But Tamiya Nerd had probably the best idea for what a potential origin for this Monoshock could be. He said that he thought it was, in fact, a UG product, probably shipped by Parma to the U.S., and his thinking was that perhaps it wasn't for the frog at all, but for the brat, because the fact that it sits on the top, in some ways that makes it a little bit more vulnerable, but it wouldn't be vulnerable if it was sitting under the body of the brat. So this might have been UG's first stab at a suspension for the ORV, for the very first ORV, the brat. And that's a pretty good one, because it does look very similar to the other setup I have that I know is UG. This is brass here. This seems to be, I don't know, chrome or steel. But they are very similar looking. The directions, however, are not at all similar looking. I have the instructions for the UG, and you can tell they're translated. The translation's a little rough, but the images are pretty impeccable, crystal clear compared to the instructions that came for the Monoshock, which I have a hard time figuring out what the heck's going on there. All right, this has been too long. Hope you're still with me. If not, I don't blame you. Thank you for watching. This is part 2 on the Mystery Monoshock that we'll now say it's a UG, predecessor to the UG independent dampers. We'll go with that. Thanks to me, a nerd. Thanks for watching. Talk to you guys soon.